So I'm assuming in '98 it was called Site. I'm assuming it was just more of a document management thing, wasn't it?
That's all it really started as in our problem.
So I'm assuming in '98 it was called Site. I'm assuming it was just more of a document management thing, wasn't it?
That's all it really started as in our problem.
So I'm assuming in '98 it was called Site.
Oh, I'm getting a lot of feedback.
That's a lot of feedback. Hang on.
That's all it really started as in our problem.
So I'm assuming in '98 it was called Site.
Oh, I'm getting a lot of feedback.
That's a lot of feedback. Hang on.
That's all it really started as in our problem.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Hang on.
Hold on.
Good job of testing, isn't it? Can you hear me now, Mac?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, so that sounds to me I've got something else open in the background here. Okay, is that better?
That's much better.
Okay, so for some reason I've muted. Okay, that might be Ivan. I don't know. Oh, okay. Well, let's not get in the background, and we've got your slides. So I think we're all ready to go, actually.
Yeah.
So we've got 2 minutes before the doors open.
I've muted.
Yeah, I've never done this where you do it over Hangouts and then push it over to YouTube. This is kind of interesting.
This is the latest, greatest stuff. Leading edge, as they say.
Okay. Yeah, I just have always done it over Skype. We started doing that with my user group. I think it was live communication server, but same idea.
Okay. So Ivan, you're telling me my typing needs to be muted. Okay, I came here. Oh, hey. It's me. Yes. Okay. So hang on a minute. Let me. The pinging. Okay. Well, actually, hang on. Let me. I'm going to go on mute now. So Ivan, if you IM me. Okay, can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to close. I'm going to close Teams completely for me. I'll just look on the. I'll just get it on my phone. I mean, oh, this is going to be a pinging session, you could say.
Okay, and on my monitoring screen, I can see your glasses, so not my slides. So, do I need to reshare again, or? Oh, there we go. Well, it's 12:15, so let's go ahead and get started. My name is Max Segman. I'm a senior SharePoint consultant for nationwide IT services here in the DC metro region. And this afternoon's topic is the top 5 tools from my SharePoint Office 365 toolkit. These are the things I've used over the years that have saved my behind, helped out, rescued customers, and generally made my life a lot easier. Wanted to say thank you to Soho Dragon for hosting this, and just one minor correction, I'm not an MVP. Been nominated a few times, but to quote Wayne's World, I'm not worthy, I guess. So who am I? As I said, I'm the senior SharePoint SME at Nationwide IT Services. I've been doing SharePoint since 1998 when the first iteration of sites showed up in Project 1998, Project Web Access. Started using it then through Digital Dashboard and Tahoe and so forth. So I've been through all the rough years of SharePoint with 2001 and 2003 before it really took off in 2007. Been focused primarily on Department of Defense and federal consulting since I retired from the Navy in 2001. Worked for several of the larger companies like Accenture, CSC, several small companies here around the Beltway area. Was named to the Global Top 50 most SharePoint influencers. And you can usually find me at any of the SharePoint events in the Mid-Atlantic, from New York down to Charlotte. Just recently retired from running my user group, the Federal SharePoint User Group, which was the largest in the nation. And I always put the warning label out there. I'm a retired Navy officer, so I should probably come with a warning label. Navy folks tend to not be politically correct. A little bit of a disclaimer before we get into the brief. The views are my own, and they're based on my experience. They may not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of my employers, customers, or so forth. You're free to disagree with me. You won't be the first or the last. A lot of these which tool is better discussions almost start religious wars. But I will say I was not paid, compensated, or bribed by any of the companies listed. Most of the tools that I've got in my slide pack, I've used for at least the last 10 years. Some of them are a little newer than that, so not all of them. So I know their strong points. I know where the ugly warts are, and feel free to ask me if you have any questions about anything that we don't cover in the slide pack. And all my information is at the end of the slides. I'll send all that to the folks at Soho Dragon so they can post that out.
Okay. And there's also the chat window in the YouTube. So any questions going through there, I'll feed it. I'll field those through you to Mac.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So
yeah, and
interaction experience.
Yeah, I do prefer interactive. So don't feel free to pop something in the chat window and ask a question. I do have a hard stop at 1300 or 1 o'clock for the civilian types. So if I can't get you your answer during this, then we'll just take it offline.
That's fine, no problem.
So what exactly is the problem? You got to start everything with a problem statement. Back in the Jurassic period, according to some of the SharePoint folks I've worked with, everything was simple. SharePoint was on-prem, and so there was a single list. Now that we've moved into this kind of mixed world of some folks are on-prem, some folks are 100% in the cloud, some are a mix of each other, the list got a little confused because some things work just in the cloud, some things are just for on-prem. And so it's not exactly as neat a list as it used to be in the old days. But I will identify where I use what tool goes where. And I do apologize if I sniffle. I'm just coming off a very bad head cold and flu. So the areas that we're going to cover, and I'll point out, we're not going to cover migration. There's a lot of arguments and enough folks out there saying, what's the best migration tool? I'm just going to avoid that one. We're going to look at things that folks usually don't think about until it's too late. And the first one being governance. Everybody knows we got to have governance, and governance is a good thing, but how do I do it? How do I automate it? How do I make it simple? And so that's covers a whole spectrum of configuration management, compliance, data loss prevention. How do I protect PII, PIA, ITAR information? And again, if you're not familiar with any of the acronyms, just pop it in the chat window. The other one, the next one we'll look at is records management. Records management is not exactly an exciting topic, but it's something that can keep you out of jail or avoid big fines if you don't do it right. And it's not just for the government, depending on the industry, large pharmaceutical, insurance, mortgage, everybody's got record keeping and compliance requirements that mirror both the DoD 5015.2 or the National Archive and Records Agency, or NARA, standards. And so if you don't think records are important, try to go to an IRS audit with none of your back tax returns. The next area we'll look at is metadata management. Metadata is, again, one of the strongest things in the SharePoint world, but it's too hard. And if you look at somebody like Treasury a couple of years ago when they were trying to classify, I think it was around 50,000 documents dealing with TARP and parts of the bailout, and they were trying to manually read through everything so they could apply their correct metadata tags. It was just too painful. There's tools that can do that for you. And it's easier, faster, cheaper. We'll look at application performance monitoring tools. This section is primarily for folks on Prem. And when I do this session live, I can usually ask how many folks are still on Prem as compared to the crowd and get kind of a sense of what the split is. I can't do that in a virtual environment. Then we'll look at user security and how do we automate that, make it simpler. And then the bonus section, or for anybody that's familiar with New Orleans terms, lagniappe, we'll look at application modernization. So jumping right in, how did I evaluate these? Again, these are things that I've used. And, you know, I'm not a big fan of the fad solutions, things that pop up, you know, and then they're there for a couple of months and then they're gone. These, the tools that I pick are ones that have been around for quite a while. They've gone from version to version. More importantly, they've got to be simple to use. They've got to be simple to install and configure, and they've got to have a short time to get up and functional. The reason for that is a lot of times I have to put these in the hands of my consultants and send them out into the field. And I don't want to spend a week training them up just to get a tool configured. They've got to be cost effective. I'm kind of cheap. I don't want the government wasting my tax dollars, so I want the biggest bang for the buck. I've got to be able to build the business case saying, here's the business value you're going to get back from this. And the support has to be stellar. You know, if I've got a problem, if I'm out on site at a large federal agency and run into a problem, I don't want to wait a day or two to get a response. I need to be able to get a response in minutes. And I can say from past experience, when I call AvePoint concept searching or RANCOR, I get a response, I get a call back within 5 minutes. They kind of set the standard for everybody else to follow.
Is that their premium support, or is that all part of their standard?
That's pretty much the standard.
Okay.
You know, they're just very, very responsive. And a lot of times, you know, I'm out doing proof of concepts with a lot of these solutions because the government's not going to say, hey, I'm going to go invest in a $20,000 to $60,000 solution just because you said so. We want to see it. We want to try it. So a lot of these, and I'm actually doing that here at US Geological Survey with AppDynamics, where we're doing it in a test environment at no cost. So, and even with that, I can get a response from those guys in a matter of minutes.
Very cool.
Yeah. And without a doubt, AvePoint's probably the best. Maybe that's because I've got them all trained. They know that I've got the top guys all on speed dial. And if I don't get an answer, I'm just going to call their boss. So the first area that we'll look at is governance. And again, the problem statement is governance is good. Everybody knows we need a governance policy, but historically what people do is write very large governance documents that then get put on a shelf. Nobody ever reads it. Nobody knows what's in it. And it's very hard to take that policy document and actually automate it and make it operational, if you will. And so the winner for this is actually a tie. And it depends on whether you're on-prem or in the cloud, or either of these solutions work, either in the on-prem or in the cloud. The first one is AvePoint. Their overall AvePoint, it started as a migration and a backup tool but it's now expanded to a complete suite of tools that includes their security auditing, governance automation, some records, all sorts of good things. And if you're looking for a simple out-of-the-box solution that's pretty much pre-configured for everything you're going to want, you want to use AvePoint. It's very easy to stand up either on-prem or in the cloud. And they've got their governance automation tools. You just have to start thinking about what rules do you want to set. The other one is concept searching, and this is a little bit different in their approach. Concept searching is a metadata management tool that you can use by doing the automated metadata extraction to enforce your governance policies. This is more of a you build the solution based on the tool. So it's a little longer to get up and running on, but it's just absolutely spectacular in the things you can do with it. It's been used by the Air Force Medical Command since 2008, and they've had 0 PII, PIA, HIPAA breaches in the last 10 years, which for a government agency or DoD, that's pretty phenomenal. And it's got tons and tons of use cases of different ways you can use that. And so again, governance, it's a tie. AvePoint is more of the pre-configured out-of-the-box solution. Concept search is something you're going to have to configure and build the solution yourself. And so I would give AvePoint the edge. Kind of both talked about this already. The other thing about AvePoint is it's a very wide-ranging suite of tools. Once you buy the core platform, there's a lot of other things you can plug in as you enable the different modules. So, records management. This is one of the areas that government has struggled with. Commercial industry is a little bit ahead in some respects, and part of that is because the standards aren't exactly as stringent as they are in the Department of Defense and the federal government. But there have been multiple federal directives, including the 2009 White House directive, saying everybody will comply, and pretty much across the board they've been ignored. It's too hard, too expensive, too difficult, too painful. And for the longest time, there was only one tool out there that really worked with SharePoint effectively, and it was prohibitively expensive, very difficult to use, had an ugly user interface, and so nobody did it. That's changed in the last couple of years. Collabware, which again, they have a cloud offering, but it's not certified yet. So Collabware for on-prem, it's the best if you have to meet DoD 5015.2 certification. It's simple to use. It's baked into the ribbon. It becomes part of, it's a native SharePoint interface, and their content lifecycle management tools are probably best of breed. If you're 100% in Office 365 and only need NAR compliance, then AvePoint just recently released their NAR compliant records management solution. And again, that's for the cloud. So I don't see anybody, I'm not sure if anybody does records management. Again, I focus on federal and Department of Defense, so that's a very big thing down here. Metadata management. We all know metadata management is good, but manually tagging documents is painful. It's painful if you're migrating. It's painful if you've got a whole document library and you have to read through it and apply the tags. Experience showed when we did this at Department of Treasury, you have to have 3 different people read the same document and tag it to get a consistent results across the board, because the way I tag things is going to be different than my coworker. And the way I tag things when I'm reading the first document of 100 is going to be different than how I tag them when I get to the last document in the batch, because as I go through, I start seeing the relationships and what's tied to other things and how these different things all weave together. And so my go-to tool has been concept searching, both for either on-prem or in Office 365. There's a lot of folks out there, and this, like I said, sometimes starts religious wars depending on what conference you're at. But I've worked with concept searching since 2008, 2007 timeframe. Again, easy to install, easy to configure. I like it that it can automatically associate content to the term store. As I can build up my term sets, and it can crawl the content and automatically tag it for me. It can do that in SharePoint or in file shares, or if I'm doing my migration, it can pre-tag the content before I migrate it up, so it automatically gets tagged as it goes into the new environment. It has its own rules engine built into the product that can be used very similar for the way Microsoft's configured data loss prevention. So as you load content into a library, the concept search will intercept that, crawl all the content, extract all the metadata, and tag it. Or if you're looking for specific things, such as a credit card numbers, it can identify that, isolate it, and quarantine it before it actually goes live. Again, it's infinitely configurable and versatile. I've built many solutions on this tool, whether it's for identifying records, different industry standard compliance, ITAR, even geolocking, saying, okay, this can't go outside certain country boundaries. It's a great tool, worth your time to look at if you need to do something like that. And then the one that I'm actually dealing with right now, which is application performance monitoring tools. How do I go out and identify where the problem code is, or the bottlenecks, or which device is causing a problem? Is it a failing router? Is it a problem with my VMware? When I go and ask the developers, they all swear that the developers, everything's fine, their code's fine, it always works great in development. Custom code is never a problem with them. And so in comes a company called AppDynamics. Now, here's the caveat. I know they have a cloud offering. I've only actually done hands-on with this on-prem. I can't really think of a case where I would use this in Office 365, but I could see if I was building everything in Azure or something like that. So what does it do? It provides end-to-end monitoring from the browser to SQL, and so all the way back and forth. And I've got a screenshot of this one in just a minute. But it can do more than just SharePoint. If you're a Linux, Java, Apache-based stuff, it can instrument all that, show you all the bottlenecks. We use this at Washington Gas trying to resolve 6 years of a failed implementation. And we're able to very quickly go through and say, this is where the problem is. This device is a problem. This line of code in this module here is breaking. It's a great tool. The developers hated it because it highlighted where the code problems were. And this is kind of what you see. And this is from one of their infrastructure screens, where it'll trace that packet as it goes from point to point through everything, show you how long it took on each hop, what processes it kicked off, what custom code it triggered, and all the way down to the line of code that's erroring. And so if you're on-prem and having performance issues, this is a great tool. You can always sit and try and scour the event logs and the ULS logs, but that's only going to get you so far. Then one of my favorite ones, and have been doing a lot of talking on this topic. Previous employer had a great case study that we did on this. With user security, let's say I have a situation where permissions management has spiraled out of control, and there's no easy way for the site owners or library owners to get it back under control.
You like every site, yeah.
Yeah, well,
environment, yeah.
To put it in perspective, and I've been threatened under penalty of law, I can't name the company, but if you look at number 305 on this 2017 Fortune 500 list, that's the case study that I did. Now, in a single site collection with only 200 people, they had 175 site collection administrators, and they had close to 16,000 folders in just shared documents, and there's 14.39 million unique permissions just in shared documents. And that's when I say spiral out of control. Permissions had gotten so messed up that they made everybody, except for the interns, a site collection administrator. And then when that started failing, they started sharing to the everyone group. They thought that was everybody in HR. They didn't realize it was everybody in the company, all 450,000, and 50,000 in each of the two sub companies. So very, very sensitive information, including promotions, bonuses, compensation, just basically got sent globally. I have a whole nother talk that I do on how we managed to mitigate that. But one of the tools that we brought in was DeliverPoint from Lightning Tools. There's a lot of tools that do user security. AppPoint, Metalogix, SPDocket, ShareGate, they're all out there. But the question is, why DeliverPoint instead of like an AppPoint? First, it's cheaper. And two, all the other ones are server-based and admin-based. And so that means, and this is where you have a decision, do I put all this responsibility for fixing this on the shoulders of my admins who are already overworked, or do I push this responsibility down to the site owners and the library owners? I tend to think that the library owners and the site owners should be responsible for their information. And so we rolled the tool out. We also gave the content owners training, which included here's your roles and responsibility, and made them accountable for the information they were containing. And a lot of folks have come back and said, well, do you think we really need this? And I said, well, it's real simple. Go start poking around. If you're in Office 365, go start poking around Delve and look at what your coworkers are sharing. Delve is a great tool, but if folks aren't doing security correctly, you can start surfacing all sorts of stuff that you shouldn't see in there. So what does the DeliverPoint interface look like? And that's what, let me wait for the screen to catch up. And there we go. So I can do things. Down here is my navigation screen, and I can look at things either from a farm view or a user view. So I can go through and say, show me for a particular site or show me for a particular farm where a user has permissions, how are they assigned, how did they get those permissions, and then en masse across the farm, completely remove them. The other thing I like is I can transfer permissions. Let's say I have Billy who is retiring or got fired, and I have to take everything that Billy's got across the farm and transfer it to Susie. It's somewhat...
These are Billy's permissions, correct?
Correct. Okay. Including unique permissions. So, I can always just add them to the same security groups and all that, but that then breaks when I get into the item level permissions that people will do. But I can just click a button and transfer everything from one person to the other, or I can clone them, or I can transfer it for a short period. Say somebody's out on vacation for 2 weeks, and whoever's covering for them can fill in for them. It's very user friendly, and if you're an owner of a library or a list or a site, you see this ribbon when you go to your site. If you're not, you don't see it. And so the key thing here is it pushes that responsibility down to the content owner instead of just the SharePoint admins. If you're a SharePoint admin, small company, you have 3 or 4 site collections, maybe you can manage permissions. If you're SharePoint admin and there's only 2 of them at Accenture with 450,000 people, and then you got another 30,000 in Avanade, another 30,000 at Accenture Federal, and one of the largest Office 365 implementations ever, there's no way those 2 people can manage permissions for that whole organization. So we pushed this down as far as we could go. And then the last area, application modernization. Now there's a lot of tools out there, and some folks, everybody's got their favorite way they like to code things, and things are changing. But let's say I'm in SharePoint 2013 on-prem. I've got a lot of custom solutions. I'm going to Office 365. How do I get my stuff migrated? How do I make sure my custom code works? Either 2016, 2019. I say it's a bit of a vague area because there's so many possibilities for where you're coming from, where you're going to. I've got customers now that are just now getting rid of their 2010 environments and stabilizing on 2013. I've got other folks that are well into the cloud, 2016, 2019. And so what's the one thing that I can get that will work for pretty much anything? And your answer is Rencore. Rencore is actually the company. They make a lot of other tools, but the 2 that you want to look at is if you're doing migrations, they have a thing called SP Transformator. It will go through, it will crawl the farm, it will find all the custom solutions and say, okay, here are going to be your problem areas. Oh, and here's the links for how you can correct those and what you need to get smart on. To a certain degree, it's supposed to be able to convert those if you have minor, just like a WSP, that you deployed to the solution. It's supposed to be able to upgrade that automatically for you into whatever you want, whether it's Java, SharePoint framework, or whichever. And it's a very powerful tool. And the other one, and again, the developers don't like this, but it's SPCAF, which is a code quality. I'm a big fan of this because the developers throw something over the fence and say, it works fine in dev, and we put it into the test environment and crashes everything. And the answer is, well, it must be the test environment because it worked fine in dev. And so I run it through SPCAF and it pulls out, here's all your memory leaks, here's all your code issues. It's a code quality checker based on best practices and industry standard things that it's going to go look for. You can tweak that because some of the things, when you first start running it, it'll give some false positives. There's things that Visual Studio will put in a solution that Microsoft has turned around and said you shouldn't do. So go figure, Microsoft contradicting themselves.
No,
never happens.
No confusion.
Yeah. They said, well, don't prepend or don't use, prepend or use these underscores. And that comes up in SPCAF, but Visual Studio actually puts that in the solution files. Yeah. And so other areas worth mentioning, again, migration and content reorg. if it's migration, I always go AvePoint. It's never let me down. And folks that know me down here in the region, it's referred to as not being an empty box. It's kind of an inside joke. The most cost-effective tool out there is ShareGate. A lot of folks are using that. Just
Yeah, use that.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, we use that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, we use it. We use it here. I mean, it's not as full-featured as all the AvePoint stuff is. It's got some issues with user mapping when you're going from a single domain to multiple domains, but it gets the job done, and it's cost-effective.
It's very good for like more ad hoc point and click promotion of content from dev to QA to prod as well.
Yeah, it's, our biggest problem with ShareGate that we ran into is USGS on Prem was within its own single domain. As they're moving to Office 365, it's Department of Interior that owns the tenant. So USGS is just a site collection within the DOI tenancy. ShareGate, when we're moving stuff into that, when it's trying to assign the permissions and it's going down, it does the first logical match. And we've seen this in a lot of cases where Bureau of Land Management, BLM, Susie Smith will pop up well before Susie Smith and USGS. So we've seen a lot of permission misalignment in that. There's ways to do the user mapping, but it's a little painful. But again, if you run into that and you have questions, I've already got all the bruises from that. So feel free to ask. If you inherited an environment that, like most of the ones I come into, where you say, where's the documentation, and you get the blank stare, get SP Docket. It'll crawl the information. It'll basically create your farm documentation for you.
Okay. So SP Docket has a great consultant license as well, which is great. Have they now expanded that for office for tenants as well?
I'm not sure. I haven't followed up on it in a while. Last time I used it was about 1.5 years ago. And normally when I get, and I have to say, if I'm showing up on a project, it's usually in big trouble. And so my first question is, show me the documentation. We don't have it. And I get, a lot of times they'll do the trial version, or they'll buy it for SP Docket. I'm not exactly up to speed on what their current licensing is, but I used to have the consultant license. And so I've primarily, last couple of years, I've been doing some Office 365, but I keep getting, because my background is so much of the on-prem stuff, I keep getting thrown back into that. So another quick trip back into application modernization. If you've got to rebuild stuff, I'm a big fan of Nintex. I know Office 365 has a lot of apps that are coming out that are almost there. Flow, forms, and some of those things are getting better every week, but I can still do more, faster, easier with Nintex than I can with some of the Office 365 native apps. And for user interface, Live Tiles, if you've never looked at it, it's a very easy, quick solution to give you I guess what they used to call the Metro look, the tiles, like in Windows 10. Very good tool.
Tell me, have you got much experience with the community sites now? Because that's now, it's not as slick as Live Tiles, but the gap between what was out of the box and perhaps what the customer is expecting has now got much narrower.
It is. We're just here at USGS. We're just starting to go into that as we're moving a lot of the sites up into Office 365. I've got some experience from a couple of other customers, but it was minimal. And the community sites and everything seems to be moving faster than I am.
Right, or faster than the clients are going into the cloud.
Yeah, my one experience, and I've already learned this the hard way, is don't try to rebrand a community site the way you used to for older on-prem stuff. It didn't go well.
Well, that's also you using the modern rather than classic as well.
Yeah, that was a classic case of, well, we always did it this way, and go, well, you always did it that way for the classic and on-prem. It doesn't work that way with modern sites. And so completely blew some stuff up. And so to recap, if I only had one tool that I could pick, I'd go with AvePoint. Just because it's an entire suite of tools, it covers pretty much anything. If I could get any two tools, it's going to be AvePoint and concept searching. If my primary problem is user securities and unique permissions that are out of control, get DeliverPoint. If you've got compliance, records, legal type stuff for you, get Cloudware. If you're on-prem and you're having performance or stability issues and you can't track down where the problem is, look at AppDynamics. And if you absolutely insist on doing custom code, get the Rencore tools. And if you're only going to read one book on SharePoint, it's Essential SharePoint by Susan Handley, either the 2010 or 2013 version. And that one was a paid for ad. She's a great lady. She's local down here. I keep running into her. We have a running joke that she gets 25 cents for every book she sells, and that's funding her kids' college. I said, where is it going? Community college?
Trump online.
Yeah. And so I've got links to all the tools I've mentioned and my contact information, as well as my old user group, which I just retired from running, handed that off. And again, I'll send the Soho guys these slides. So feel free to reach out. If you need a demonstration of any of the tools, reach out and I can get that set up for you. Like I said, I know the top folks at all the companies, and they're pretty responsive. And so that leaves me with about 5 minutes for chat before I got to run to another meeting.
Okay, Mac, thank you for your time on that. In terms of in terms of what you're seeing with sort of so we say the migrations into the cloud, would you sort of say once stuff's in Office 365, in theory, the updates would just be a continuous drip feed of updates, wouldn't it?
Yes.
So are we looking at the days of when the migration toolbox will be empty? I think it's always need to be moved around, but migration in theory should calm down a bit.
It will, and that's one of the reasons I like AvePoint. The Metalogics guys, well now Quest, they'll hate me for this, but years ago when I was having a discussion with the CEO at Metalogics, and he said, "Why are we getting beat?" And I go, "Because you're a one-trick pony. You do migration, and then you're done. AvePoint, I can do my migration, and then I can enable the different modules, and I've got auditing and compliance, and I've got this and that." They said, "Oh, well, we're more than migration. We can do content reorganization too." I'm going, you don't do that often. And if I'm reorganizing my content on a weekly basis, I'm going to lose my users because, one day it's there, then it's not, and the users get confused and frustrated. So once stuff gets up and migrated in, the need for the big migration tool wars, I think, will start falling off. But I don't think we're going to see on-prem completely gone away for quite a while yet.
Yeah, that's true. No, I'll go along with that. I think, particularly SharePoint 2019. Again, Microsoft said, "Oh yeah, was it 2016 was the last on-prem version?" And of course, 2019 came out, and I think there'll be the next another new version of coming out as well. So, I agree. The migration party, the music has quietened down, but it hasn't stopped.
Yeah, Microsoft's got a very large footprint within the federal government, Department of Defense. There's a lot of very highly classified environments that just simply can't go to the cloud. That I think maybe part of the thing driving the continued on-prem. I mean, if Microsoft had its preferences, they would discontinue all on-prem, I think. But there's a lot of folks like National Security Agency, folks up at Fort Meade. They can't, they're not going to put that stuff up in the cloud, not anytime soon.
Sure. Okay. I see no questions in the chat window, and we're 2 minutes to go, so almost on the hour. So in respect of your time, Matt, thank you for your time on this. Ivan's got a copy of the slides, so we'll get that on SlideShare, and so we'll distribute that to the members of the meetup.
Okay. And again, yeah, thank you for having me. I always like doing these for Soho Dragon, and one of these days I'll get back up to New York City.
All right, and of course, SharePoint Saturday is in July. If you're.
Yep.
All right.